You're at a funky angle. So I'm sharing reflections from this book. This book has been like really transformational for me in just realizing a lot about myself and my values and my standards, and why I kept repeating the same pattern over and over again with different people. And this book talks about, let me find what it's called, a role self. So basically you create a role self in order to get your needs met. And if you aren't aware of it, you continue to repeat this pattern throughout your adult life until you step into your true self, which isn't reliant on like a role self. And so with this role self comes a fantasy that the parent will change, or there's something specific that she calls it. She calls it some sort of a fantasy. And so what we do is we create a fantasy that our parent will change, or if we do something, then it's going to be the thing that changes everything. And so we try to recreate proof of this, even though we know it's not possible, and the only thing that we can really do is show up differently and respond differently and set better boundaries. And I realized that the fantasy that I was playing out was like, oh, if I am good enough, or if I am bad enough, I will get enough of an emotional reaction to actually let me know that you care. Because that's how I learned to get my needs met. It's either I would be really good and silent and internalize everything, or I'd be out of pocket and get the needs met. So on two opposite ends of the spectrum. And so this caused me to create a role self that fluctuated from one end of the spectrum to the other end of the spectrum. So essentially two different role selves. And this is basically like what schizophrenia is. This is what BPD is. This is literally because of emotional immaturity. And so when we become aware of like actually what happened and that our needs are actually worthy of being met, we can create actual and real conscious change by the way that we show up, but also by the framework of relationships that we hold in our mind and what we allow in our reality. It took me not having my physical needs met to finally be like, oh, something's not right here. And everyone deserves to have their emotional needs met. So if you aren't getting them met, get curious about who you can surround yourself with, who you can attract into your world based on who you're being, like who you want to actually be with. And it's like, we try and save these relationships, but at the end of the day, it's not working out because we actually don't want it to work out. And so at some point, it requires just walking away, and also realizing that either we don't actually like the person or that we don't feel safe with them. And realizing and admitting that about a caregiver is very scary, especially if they're still caregiving for you in some way, shape, or form, or if you feel dependent on them for security. You won't be able to actually live your own life until you develop a sense of autonomy and recognize the way that you're still interacting in this dynamic, and shift that within yourself so that the world begins to show up differently for you, and you actually close out the cycle rather than perpetuate it. Because emotionally immature parents were treated the same or worse than how you were treated. So it's just a cycle that repeats itself. But doing the exercise of understanding what role self you're playing can be really powerful, because a lot of the time it's not even really us. It's like this character we've created to essentially survive. And then we get stuck in that when that's not who we really came here to be. And it's the journey of stepping outside of that and stepping into who we actually came here to be. So if you have any reflections on this book, I'd love to hear them.